Just real quick, we are celebrating our 30th year here as the James L. West Center here in Fort Worth. And we have, we serve persons impacted by dementia. And this means those that might have the diagnosis, but their family members, all their neighbors, those community support members that we have, and healthcare professionals as well. We do have a residential care facility or community here in Fort Worth that we can do long-term care. We can do short-term care as well for respite. We also have a senior adult day program. So our participants come during the day, they get the great expert care that we provide, and then they go home in the evenings and on weekends. And then we are soon to be opening our short-term rehab house in our community here in Fort Worth. And I'm sorry, I'm getting some people are trying to come onto the Zoom, but I'm getting a couple of messages. Sorry about being distracted. So sorry. But we are happy to announce that this short-term rehab should be opening within the next several weeks on that. Okay, so we'll be able to provide, use Medicare to help them get into rehab, whether it's a broken hip or they're coming out of the hospital, so they can do specialized rehab here. We're persons that really do know how to do rehab with somebody with dementia, and then of course to go home after they're well and leave with other support services as well. So today, and before we get on, I am Jamie. If you're not aware of, we have not met before, but we are going to talk about a lot of different things in regards to sexuality and dementia. We'll talk about what changes for persons with dementia and how their sexual desires or lack of or relationships with other people, how they change over time or as the disease progresses. But we're also going to discuss how that changes for us as their caregivers or partners or spouses potentially with these individuals. And if there is some inappropriate behavior that comes up, we'll kind of discuss maybe why that is, but also how to manage that the best way. But I do want to start off and say that most of the sexual behaviors or sexual expressions that we see in persons with dementia, a lot of the time, it doesn't have to necessarily do with sex or intercourse. A lot of the time, it has to do with intimacy or a lack thereof. So I want to talk about these two definitions of sexual, just intimacy, but then sexual intimacy, because we think about intimacy with somebody else, and this is just an act or an expression that serves as a token of familiarity or our ability to express our appreciation, our love for that other individual, and vice versa, how we receive that token of familiarity or appreciation or love or care from somebody else as well. And intimacy is a variety of different things. It can just be a conversation with somebody else, a feeling that you have. It can be holding hands, but all the way up to a sexual intimate relationship as well, where there is that expression or that act can be more physical, up to where it is kissing, it might be petting, it might actually be intercourse or other sensual activities. So I wanted to know that when we talk about intimacy, it's more than just about sex. And as we're coping with changes, if we're thinking about it as an intimate relationship that I have with a spouse or a partner or whomever, this is a relationship. This is a part of who we are. This is an important part of who we are, an important relationship that we have. And the Family Caregiver Alliance found that the subject of sexual intimacy, the subject of sex, rarely comes up in conversations as professionals are working with families. In the course of this disease, it rarely comes up. But it is something that is so important to our daily, our everyday lives, and we have a relationship with someone. So the idea of it not coming up, there's a variety of things that happen, and we'll talk about some misconceptions, but the idea that sexuality in an older person can be, it might be shameful or sick, or it really just seems to be a taboo topic, or something that's really uncomfortable to talk about. So, but knowing that every single one of us, we are all sexual beings. Human beings are sexual beings, and it's normal. It's a normal part of who we are. And it's normal to have the needs. It's normal to have the feelings that come along with it. It is all normal. It is all okay. And as we're going to talk about some of those changes in those needs and feelings through with this disease, all of those are normal, and all of those feelings and changes are okay as well. Because somebody has a diagnosis of dementia does not mean it's going to take away their sexuality, right? I say all the time, dementia doesn't take away everything. We know it takes away some things, but it doesn't take away everything. And this sexual part of an individual, it doesn't take away that. It changes how they respond to those feelings and how they're able to act upon those, but it doesn't take it away. So some things that we might see is your loved one might not be interested in sexual intimacy. How y'all relate to each other in a sexual way can change, but a lot of the feelings that come up with this, whether it's however those feelings arise, some common feelings that come up can be anger, can be guilt, can be rejection, can be shame, because of those changes that are happening in this intimate relationship. And these changing of the sexual feelings, or maybe it's a lack of inhibition in our loved one that has dementia. And all of these feelings that come up, you might have them several times over the course of the disease in regards to just a sexual expression. Again, these are all normal and they're okay. And we're going to talk through maybe what brings up some of these, but how to respond to these as well. And we don't want to take, particularly if it's a lack of sexual desire, we don't want to take any of this personally. As these changes happen, again, our sexual relationship with our partners is part of our partnership. It's part of that relationship, part of who we are. And it's okay, the loneliness and maybe the rejection that can come from that. It's normal to feel that, but please know that our loved ones sitting in front of us, the intention, there's never an intent to make you feel lonely or rejected. They're doing the best they can with the changes that are happening in them. But we really we have these feelings, and these feelings are very real. They're very true to us, whether it's, guilt or shame or anger or rejection, whatever these feelings are, knowing that that's okay to have these feelings. They're real. And I want to, if they really are invasive to me, I really want to talk to somebody that's trusted about these feelings and be able to work through them. And we'll talk about ways who you can go to do that with at the end of this as well. We talk about this sexual relationship, and being in a sexual relationship, again, is part of who we are, but it also tells us of, that's our connections. It's our closeness with other people. And we're not just talking about, when I say sexual relationship, I'm not just talking about intercourse either. This is how we show that intimacy to that particular person, that partner, our spouse that's in front of us, right? I think about my husband, and you don't know how to explain it, but that's my person. That's my go-to. That is the one I want to be with, right? In a variety of ways, whether I just want to be in the same room with him or I want to be with him. So we have these connections, some we can explain and some we cannot. These connections and this closeness that we have make us, we're belonged, we feel belonging, we feel this acceptance, right? And it's where we are comfortable with somebody else. Even if, and I love that paragraph, even if nothing else is going right, I have this comfortableness with this, my person, right? And of course, sexual intimacy is something that we've been doing probably for a long time. It makes us pleasurable. It makes us feel good. Again, we're all sexual beings, and it's just a part of how we were made. But when we do, something that happens, as dementia changes the brain, there are going to be some changes that happen within relationships. but also the sexual intimacy relationship, because it changes expectations, it changes function, it changes behaviors, and it changes, even in those relationships, the intimacy of it. And I'm not talking about sexual intimacy, but just how we're able to relate with that person. These all change, right? And these changes can be very stressful. Some of the changes can be rewarding, or if we say, I'm not able to do this anymore, but I can change it and do this, there's some, I guess, kind of ebb and flow or give and take for some of that, but a lot of times it's stressful. There's losses that we incur over, of course, the course of the disease, but when it comes to this intimate relationship, the sexual intimacy. So there's grief that's involved with the changes that happen as well. And knowing that we must accommodate this disease and the changes that are happening to our loved one, because they're doing the best they can with the changes that are happening. And it's thinking about, well, how do I focus on all pleasurable aspects of our relationship? So it goes beyond intercourse. It's all these pleasurable aspects of our relationship. And if, I could ask you to take a few seconds to think about, what are those pleasurable aspects of your relationship? Is it going for a walk? Is it just being able to laugh with your partner? Is it you'll enjoy the same movies? Is it you'll have the same interests? What are these pleasurable aspects? And we really want to focus on all of those things, in particular as we're having changes in that sexual intimacy part. So as dementia progresses, there are increasing losses. Sometimes people with dementia will have a loss of self-esteem, as they might be experiencing their losses in the way that they experience those. That self-esteem can suffer. There can be, of course, confusion that comes up from that. There can be fear, depression, anger, right? But also excessive, maybe anxiety or worry. And then just having that low self-esteem. And I think probably everybody has had low self-esteem in their time, in their lives, and how that does affect us. But how also these other emotions that we have, if I'm having low self-esteem, how does that affect how I engage or how I interact with my partner? Or if I'm having a lot of depression or anxiety, how does that interfere or affect how I interact with my partner? And how does that affect our intimacy? How does that affect all the pleasurable parts of our relationship? So it can be the same for somebody with dementia. Of course, the dementia exacerbates it, but you also might find yourself, as your loved one might be changing, and we'll talk some more about some changes that they might be experiencing. You as that caregiver, that partner, are also experiencing changes. And you may pull away emotionally, you may pull away physically for a variety of reasons. Probably most of you have had an increase in demand on your time, all the responsibilities and tasks you got to do, and then just having to watch your loved one change, and how their disease is progressing. So it can just be the frustration of the losses you continuously see, or the frustration of even some bothersome behaviors, or they're not behaving the way they always have, or that I want them to, or that I've expected them to. So we have those emotional things that come along with that. In the early stages of dementia, intimacy may be affected by the changes in that emotional connection, or sexual desire. Again, it just comes with possibly low self-esteem, where they are experiencing some losses and there may be some confusion, and this knowing I'm not able to do like I used to, or something might not quite be right. So that low self-esteem can affect some of those emotional connections, can affect some desire that we may have. But these changes are very normal. They're very difficult, but they're very normal as well. And again, as we as caregivers are taking on more roles, sometimes that intimate part of our relationship starts to fade away because we focus on other parts of that relationship. And some of those other parts might just be the day-to-day tasks. What are the things that I got to get done, right? As opposed to, generally what gets out the doors, well, I'll get to the intimacy sex part later because right now I got to do this. Or I'm too tired to get to that. So let's do, because I've been doing this all day. But we also know that there are just role changes in our relationship with our care partner, our loved one. There's the term the hidden widowhood. So if you are a spouse of somebody with dementia, there's that hidden widowhood. So you're still married, you still have this commitment to your loved one in front of you. That death till death do us part, or I'm committed with you till the end, and we have this commitment. But there's also that feelings of, well, I don't feel married anymore, but I'm committed to this person. So it's that hidden widowhood that absolutely changes your relationship and changes your emotional connection with your loved one, which is going to in turn going to change your sexual intimacy with your partner as well. You might have fewer sexual feelings toward your partner. You might feel like you might be taking advantage of your partner, and we're going to talk through a lot of this, but I want you to know we don't want to feel guilty about any of the changes that are happening for your loved one that are happening in yourself as well. It's okay to have conflicting feelings. It's okay to have changing feelings, and it's okay to work through some of these, and it's okay excuse me, to be mad about it. It's okay to be sad about it. Again, this is grief as well. These changes and some of the losses that we experience are grief. Okay. So a few facts. Again, sexuality is a continuing human need. So we're all sexual beings, and just because we hit a certain age or we get a certain disease does not mean that sexuality stops. It is common to everybody, and it is a continuation of who we are as human beings. As we age, there are many studies have shown that there's been very little change in that interest in sex or intimacy. So it might be a little bit, but there's not much change at all in, the interest of sex, or even the ability, or even just having an intimate relationship with somebody else. Somebody with dementia, they may not be able to express their desires. They may not be able to express their needs, or if they do express them, sometimes it can come out in an inappropriate way, or it can come out in public, or it can come out to somebody that you weren't expecting it to. Again, we'll talk about some of this, but just because they have dementia does not mean that their sexuality is going to go away. They're just having a hard time expressing those needs and those desires. And it is okay for you and your loved one to be sexually close in a way that's comfortable for both of you. And we'll talk about what that looks like. So this study was done through the National Social Life Health and Aging Project. But just to kind of hone in on sex in the older adult is still very real, and it's very common. But 46% of men and 18% of women in the early stages of dementia or might have a mild cognitive impairment, they report being sexually active. And I would say sometimes probably these statistics are a little low because I don't know how honest people are on some of these reports, so it might be a little bit low. But there are things that change as we get older, so there might be some sexual dysfunction for men, or decreased desire in women, or your typical changes that you see just as a normal part of aging. But it isn't really, there's a lot of things now that can help offset these changes. 10% report feeling sexually threatened, and it's just a large community or anonymous survey. And 17 had reported feeling obligated to engage in sexual activity. So even though, so you can see the first two bullet points there, it's still very much a need in a lot of people, even if there's some physical complications, right? Very few people, 10% is fairly high, that they felt sexually threatened. Or they felt obligated to have sexual activity with their partner in the early stages of dementia. It's still very much a thing that we need to talk about, and even talk about while it's very much a human need, but also some of these things that are less desirable. Even if I'm feeling obligated or I'm feeling threatened, how do I work through that? How do I, I don't want to do it if I'm feeling threatened by any means. So how do we manage that? And maybe what's causing some of that. So we'll talk about consent and capacity for somebody with dementia. Consent for anybody, right, is somebody, they understand what's going to happen. They agree to what's going to happen for both parties. That really is the main components of consent. I will say that physical arousal alone is not consent. Just because somebody is physically aroused does not mean that they are consenting to the activity. There has to be a verbal acknowledgement that I understand and that, yes, I do consent to it. Sometimes a person with dementia, if they are approaching you, right, they may be unaware of your needs. They may be unaware of how you're communicating those needs or not really understanding, even if it's you who don't consent. And we'll talk about how to best manage that. But nobody, whether it's yourself or your loved one, should feel forced or obligated into any sexual activity. Particularly, I mean, absolutely, if anybody is uncomfortable, it should not happen. And as their partner, we need to feel confident that we can recognize any form of nonverbal consent before we start that sexual activity. And this is recognizing facial expressions, it's recognizing body language, even just maybe how they're holding themselves or anything like that, or it's, excuse me, I said facial expressions. So even the facial expressions, this nonverbal, I can read nonverbally what my partner is trying to tell me. And we should feel confident in that because we know our partner's the best. But also we should know that we need to be paying attention to that as well. So we should never initiate a sexual activity without clear consent. And you know, if there's any type of reluctance, even if we might have started the activity and then you start to see some pullback or reluctance, then we stop. So capacity for somebody with dementia, what this really looks like is the capacity has to be specific to the time, the person, and the place. Somebody might have more capacity, let's say in the morning, as they do in the afternoon. Okay, so it's got to be specific to that time, to that person, particularly when we're talking about a sexual activity, the person and that place. There can be no coercion and there can be no delusion that the person with dementia could possibly be experiencing. You know, coercion or bullying or any type of abuse by any means. The individual needs to understand the sexual activity and they express the desire or interest in the act and they're able to say yes to that sexual activity. If there's ever any doubt in that, what's recommended is that the partner be guided by the nature of that relationship. So really it kind of comes down to what we have done in the past. Okay, what are the preferences of my partner? What have they been in the past prior to dementia? But it's also, even just because they have dementia, they still have the right to say no and all of those things. And we need to be watching, listening to the words, listening to the feelings behind those words, but watching that nonverbal as well. What we can see is the paraphallus, new paraphallus, I think I'm saying that right, may be indicative of impaired capacity. Really what that means if somebody they're more interested in something they haven't been interested in the past before dementia, or because it might be an object, it might be a fantasy that we haven't had in the past before dementia, that might be a kind of a warning sign that there's impaired capacity. So, and somebody that is inactive physically, a person that's physically inactive, all sexual activity should stop at that point because we're really not able to, as a healthy person, cannot really tell if they're giving consent or if they have the capacity to do that. So misconceptions that do increase the stigma about this topic, can increase the stigma about just the older adult, but also increase caregiver stress. The misconception is that an older person or elderly have little to no interest in sex. And that's just not the case. This is part of who we are as a human being, no matter what age we are, okay? Another misconception is women are unable to have orgasms after menopause. That is not true, complete misconception. The idea of sexuality in the older adult is shameful and perverse. And it's a misconception that's not true, it's a stigma, right? But because this is a natural human part of us being humans. Older people will get hurt having sex, not true. And caregivers' needs or distress are signs of selfishness or incompetence. And really what this means, like a caregiver or a partner, the caregiving partner to somebody, their needs are a sign of selfishness. That is a misconception, okay? Because we, again, being a partner of somebody, I still have needs as well as a human being, and it's not a sign of selfishness if we get the consent and the capacity from our partner, right? Signs of stress from our dementia partner. It's watching that nonverbal communication, but we don't want to assume that our dementia partner is incompetent. Because just because somebody has dementia does not mean that they are incompetent, or they don't know what's going on, or that don't have or they're ignorant. Because dementia does not make them ignorant or incompetent. A lot of times it's just a lack of understanding. So we need to kind of get rid of, we think people with dementia are incompetent, because that's not true. That's a misconception. I need to break those out. But a caregiver also, our needs are not a sign of selfishness. And then all caregiving energy and effort must go to the patient. Again, that goes back to, we also have needs, and we're also still in a relationship with those that we're caregiving for. Another misconception, that a caregiver should assume all required tasks and responsibilities. So I'll say this twice: all required tasks and responsibilities in the caregiving arena at large. No, we need to get help and support for all those. But also when it comes to a sexual activity, a caregiver is not responsible, or it's a misconception that that caregiver's got to take on all the responsibility of those particular specific tasks in that sexual activity. It is okay, or excuse me, it's not okay to have sex with someone with dementia, and that's a misconception. The person with dementia is a stranger. No, that person with dementia that you love very much is still your spouse, your partner. That's still who they are, and that's what we need to see them as first and foremost. They're just my partner that's living with dementia. Okay. And the person with dementia seems to forget that the partner is there, or how to make love. And that is not true. It does come down to, of course, consent and capacity. But they don't forget, because again, they're human beings, right? And they know their partner that's in front of them. So something else we need to think about is that the spirit is willing. However, some things do come up that might interfere with that spirit that's willing, and it can be a health-related factor. So it could be a hormone imbalance. It can be erectile dysfunction. Again, for women, that desire might go down. For women, it can be a prostate problem. It can be depression. So health-related factors might interfere with the actual functioning of that sexual intimacy, but the spirit is still willing, or that desire is still there, but the function of that might be affected by a health-related factor, or potentially a heart disease, arthritis, emphysema. Incontinence also can come up. That can really affect, again, that function or the ability of it, and sometimes the enjoyment too. There can be side effects of medication that affect the function or the ability to do a sexual activity. There can be fear, however, or also, there might be fear of a heart attack or a stroke during intimacy. Sex may not be as gratifying or as frequent than it has been in the past. And then also might be awkward to do it. Just physically, it might be awkward because of some health-related factors. Or we're trying to, this is my partner in front of me, and, we have our routine, for lack of a better word, and our comfortableness with each other, but there still might come up where it's awkward as well, or something, just not quite working this time, or it was working and then stopped, kind of things like that happen. So most common changes in sexuality and dementia, the most common is sometimes a lot of times there is a decrease in the interest, or a loss of interest in the sexual activity. And this can be from the person with dementia, but it can also be from that caregiver as well. Again, it's awkward, it's physically just how we perform the sexual activity can be awkward. There can also be a lack of sequencing on how the events need to play out. for this, that can just be, some things can be skipped. You just in that sequence of some, it's part of the brain that's being changed is the sequencing of an activity. You can see some changes in that. Requests or forms of sexual behaviors or intimacy that are outside the norm of that relationship. So they might, they might want to try something different, or they're not doing what you've always done. I would say that's probably more common. That's the foreplay part of it might not be really there, or they might skip it, or they want to do it, or they don't understand it. And so they skip part of that. So it's outside of your norm, or they try something that might be kind of odd or uncharacteristic because it's outside of that norm. But this just can be the changes that are happening in the brain. So another thing that we see that's fairly common is an absence of, so again, it's that spirit is willing, but there's the absence of the physiological arousal that can happen. So, and then what we also see is there is a lack of consideration in the responses of the care partner. So my partner that has dementia might not recognize the responses that I'm having in that sexual activity, or necessarily care about my satisfaction in that activity. And sometimes we can see they're making false sexual allegations towards somebody else. You might see this more in a community setting, and we'll talk more about that. So when we talk about sexual behaviors, and we'll come in again, but really when somebody, this lack of intimacy, I think, is one of the main reasons we might see some inappropriate sexual expressions. And it's not necessarily about sex, it's about that lack of intimacy with my person or with another human being. So some inappropriate expressions we might see are touching, hugging, kissing strangers. Okay. They can undress in public, and we'll talk about ways to get around that, or maybe why they're doing that. They can use a lot more sex talk with strangers or out in public, or it might just shock you because you've not heard that type of talk in the past. Suggestive behavior and language. There can be aggressive or repeated sexual overtures to either yourself or it could be somebody else. Exposing themselves during personal care, whether we're helping them in the shower or we're helping them get dressed, they might expose themselves. And then sometimes we might see masturbating in public. And this can be, and I'm saying any public area, it could be the living room where the family's sitting out there, or it could be at a restaurant. Something, no. Right. So when we see an inappropriate sexual expression, the best ways to respond are really not to scold, to yell at, to panic, to shame, or to ridicule, but really to come at it and not make a big deal out of it, essentially. Now, if we're in public, we absolutely want to get them out of, in the public area and take them to a more private area. But we do this in a way that we are not, again, we're not scolding them, because if they are, let's say, exposing themselves, for instance, they're probably not aware of what they're doing. They're not aware that it's inappropriate. And we need to step in, do some redirection techniques and go through, instead of coming out and like, oh my gosh, what are you doing? I can't believe you're doing this. This is completely unacceptable. Because that's a negative reaction to something that they are just doing. That's a desire. It's a desire, it's an urge they may have, and they don't have that filter to stop them. So we have to be able to take that deep breath. Hey, you know what? Let me come over here with me. I got to show you something, and let me put this coat around you because, come over here. It can also be like if there's inappropriate touching or something like that, it's okay to say with a nice tone of voice. And I've had to do this before when somebody comes to hug. You know what? I feel uncomfortable, or I don't appreciate when you touch me there. But I really like when we hug this way. When you show them a more positive way or more appropriate way to do it, and then you leave it at that. Then you, on the other end, if you have some emotions that come up from that, you need to go take care and address those emotions somewhere else, whether it's anger or shame or guilt or something. We got to take those somewhere else because they're going to feed off what our emotions are. We do want to step back and do a quick observation of maybe what triggered that behavior. Can we avoid those triggers in the future? If it's just an annoying behavior, can we ignore it? Or can we just redirect them or distract them with something else? Instead of saying, you're really being annoying, or I wish you would stop saying that, and just really maybe just distracting them from there. Really praise and encourage those acceptable behaviors. So the appropriate hug, holding hands, when we dance like this, and really playing into, and maybe overly praising and encouraging those acceptable behaviors with touch, or whether it's talk or anything like that. Because when we what gets praised will get repeated, if that makes sense. So when if they get praised for this type of hug, it will generally be repeated. So if you are still sleeping in the same bed with your loved one, and it's becoming, they're making overtures every night and it's becoming too much, you might sleep apart from your loved one. You can use delaying tactics, again, distracting or redirecting, and say, what, that sounds like so much fun, but right now, can you help me with this? Or I wanted to show you this cute thing, or I wanted to listen to this song. Can we do this? And then we'll do something later. Now, sometimes, particularly if it's aggressive or somebody might be predatory in their sexual expressions, there is an appropriate time to talk to a doctor about medications that can help offset some of that aggressive. If they're continuously aggressive or maybe predatory, then there are some medications that can help offset that, and that would be appropriate use for medications. Or there's just time when we might not have supervised or unsupervised visits with children or vulnerable adults. Not that people are being predatory, but there might just be a confusion of who that person is. My grandfather confused me as his wife once. I look like kind of my grandma, right? And he confused me as his wife once. We didn't get too far, but I can see that being, if you don't know how to respond, and it couldn't redirect him, then it might be, it might be for a period of time, I'm not alone with grandpa. And that might just be, that's all the intervention we need to put into place for right now. A great thing to start doing, and I would say this would be the first one, is to start using more, non-sexual touch throughout the day. So using more intimate touch. So it is holding hands, it's hugging, it's rubbing the back, it's all of those things. So we're getting more touch throughout the day. And I bet, most people, some of those behavioral expressions, sexual behavioral expressions will dissipate, because most of the time it's not about sex, it's about the physical, but emotional intimacy with somebody else. Because that's what is lacking a lot of time. That's the need they're expressing. They're just expressing it through maybe a inappropriate sexual way. But if I'm feeling that I'm getting this non-task touch, I'm not touching my loved one because I got to get them to do something, but I'm doing this voluntary, loving, non-sex touch, that can dissipate because they're getting that need of intimacy met. We can use validation therapy, so we're validating their feelings. Again, we're not overreacting to anything. We're not going to become angry. We're not going to become argumentative. We're not going to try and talk it out with them and be rational about why this behavior is inappropriate. And please don't do this again, because you're having the conversation with yourself. We do need to be sensitive and reassuring. And again, I mentioned earlier, we can redirect to a private area if the behavior is inappropriate for a public setting. There are also those little business cards that you can have printed up or written up that said, I'm with my partner who has dementia, please excuse any behavior that might be uncomfortable. So if you are out in public, and they might say something, or they might try and go in for a hug to a stranger, and they're kind of like, it can just you discreetly hand that card over. They're living with brain changes. Please excuse any behavior that might have been uncomfortable or out of the ordinary, right? So some things to take into consideration that might be causing some of this as well is antidepressants can bring down arousal. So if they're on an antidepressant and there's not any interest, it might be a medication side effect. Or we might need a medication to help with some of this as well. But antipsychotics can help. Antipsychotics and anticonvulsants can help with the acting out those inappropriate sexual behaviors if it's needed. If other non-pharmacological interventions aren't working, then we can talk to a doctor about temporarily using these medications to help with that. Memory medications, so that's the Razidine, the Aricept, the Namenda, may help with some sexual behaviors as well. And then, of course, hormones. So a lot of the times a doctor might prescribe hormones to somebody that might be aggressive sexually or more predatory to help manage that behavior for that period of time. So some other management tips is an environmental modification. We need to watch for how our loved one is interacting with their environment. It might be that they're understimulated, so they're going to find something to do, right? And then a desire comes up, or they're seeking out pleasure. And so can we have something lined up that's pleasurable, for them to do, whether it's reminiscence activity or something that would meet that need of finding something that's pleasurable and fun and leisurely. It could also be that they're uncomfortable. Are their clothes uncomfortable? Are they too hot? So they're going to start taking off their clothes, right? If they are aggressive with a particular individual, then their time with that individual should be limited. So, and an example for this is I look like one of the wives of one of our residents. I'm just very familiar with them. We have the same hair. And we're the same height. Okay, so we look fairly similar. And I get confused as his wife often, or I have in the past. So I can, for a period of time, and I can go and I will hold hands and I will sit with him and I will listen with him as he's thinking that I am his wife. And it can be great. It's therapeutic. I love being able to do that. But if it starts to become more than just holding hands and sitting there and talking to him, and then because he's wanting a sexual relationship with his wife, then my interaction with him should be limited for at least a period of time until that behavior stops. And then behavioral management. Again, this comes out to, are they really just seeking out intimacy? Can we give them, if there's might be a tactile stimulation that they're searching for? Can we give them a stuffed animal? Is there something tactile stimulating that we can give them, whether it's certain fabrics or something that they can really love and care on? It could be, I've seen a lady I sit next to in church actually has dementia, and she has it's kind of a fidget blanket type thing, but there's an animal attached to it, and she really enjoys that because she's been there without it before, and she's very physically affectionate when she doesn't have that. And she loves and dotes and kisses and on anybody that sits next to her. That helps manage some of that need for that physical touch for her. And it might be something that can help y'all as well. And there are also adaptable clothing. So if somebody does like undress in public or something, or might have some inappropriate things, there are clothes that we can buy that zip or button in the back, so they are not able to really take off their clothes without assistance. So that can really kind of stop that behavior, depending on the type of clothes they have on. And we really want to ask, is it really sexual? And is there a certain time of the day that if they are being sexually inappropriate, is it a certain time of day they think it's time for bed? And when it's time for bed, in the past we have been getting ready for sex. And so that's kind of what they're kind of thinking, right? So if they're fondling their genitals or other private areas, we do want to ask, is there an arousal happening? Okay. And then do we need to redirect them to a private area, or do we need to make sure they're not uncomfortable? They need to use the restroom, a bunch of stuff. It's just kind of going through that checklist of what could this behavior be possibly telling me? If they're in a community with somebody else, are they getting into bed with another resident? Again, it's asking, is it really sexual, or are they really looking for a comfortable relationship that's not sexual? Are they confusing somebody that looks familiar, possibly familiar with them? Or even, are they aware that they're getting into somebody else's bed? Or they just see a bed and they're tired. It's a good time to lie down. During ADL time, or those self-care times, is a lot when this behavioral expressions can come out. So if we're helping somebody in the shower or on the toilet, so they're already exposed, they are not aware of what's going on, and their clothes are off, and they might be thinking, oh, well, now it's time for your clothes to come off. Score, I just got lucky, type thing. And it could just be they're expressing a need for an affection. If they are hypersexual, this can happen sometimes. Somebody's really interested in sex, or they may, either expose themselves, fondle themselves, or even masturbate to try to seduce others. Please understand this is a symptom of the disease. And many times it does not mean that they want to have sex. It is a lot of times there's a hypersensitivity to the perineal area for some people. So their genitals, there's a hypersensitivity and an arousal, like it's a need to continuously touch and do all that stuff. It really has nothing to do with sex. It's just hypersensitive, and there's an arousal, and there's hyper focus on it as well. And this is because of what's happening in the brain. There's chemical changes that are happening that might cause this, but also some atrophy in the brain as well. There's the movie I'll Be Me, and it's a documentary of Glenn Campbell and his journey with dementia. So the family was very open about his journey and how they did that. And there's a part in that, if you haven't seen it, that Glenn Campbell's wife does talk about. There was a period of time where he was a little hypersexual, and what she did with that, and how she managed it. So I encourage you to watch that movie if you haven't, and to hear another wife talk about it and see how it might manifest in some people. But it really is, how can we it's increasing more attention, because it can't be that they're not looking for sex necessarily, they're just needing more attention overall. So it could just be attention, being around them, talking to them, touching them in non-sexual ways, so exploring that non-sexual touch, and then just having those intimate moments. And again, this is it can be reminiscing, it can be sharing a meal, it can be watching a favorite show, it can be going for a walk. What are those not intimate moments that might be lacking? And they're just trying to express, I want that, I need that, because it's a desire for all of us. And our persons with dementia, our partners, our loved ones, they're deserving of respect, but they also, as they're losing their awareness of their needs, rights, and the wishes of others. So being aware of that. They also can no longer understand the consequences of their actions, or the impact that their behavior has on each other, or on others. Okay, they lose their some of their social skills, and they may say, again, just not being aware that they're being inappropriate or making people uncomfortable. Okay, and unable to return in any meaningful way the same measure of affection and attention. So they might seek out attention and affection, but again, as a partner of theirs, we might not get that same attention or affection that we're seeking from them anymore, because they're unable to do that. And if that's the case, we need to go talk to somebody about those feelings, somebody we trust about those feelings, and how to best cope with those changes that are happening. This is just a quick, the 5 components of intimacy and what intimacy looks like, because it's more than just sexual intimacy, right? There's that commitment to each other. There's that affect, that emotional closeness that we have as a shared couple. We have that cognitive intimacy where we share values and goals and information. Of course, the physical intimacy, and then that mutual interaction, that give and take as a relationship unfolds. So these are all the components of intimacy, and how can we use those as we go forward? And ways to remain intimate, and using all those 5 components, knowing that it's not just about sex, it's more than that. Ways to remain intimate, and I would encourage you to start incorporating a lot of these through every day. Not only is it going to help maybe dissipate some sexual expressions, inappropriate sexual expressions. It can also kickstart something if that's what you're looking for, maybe. But it can also just change our perspective on our loved one and our changing role with our loved ones, and just build some really probably needed time of intimacy. Even though my loved one is now changing in front of me, he's still my person. They're still my person. I still need to have that intimacy. So, and these are some ways that you can do it: holding hands, telling you love them, to touch them, kiss them, cuddle with them, you name it. So I have been asked if they no longer recognize us as their spouse. So I'm not the wife anymore. I'm just that sweet lady that takes care of them. Right. There is that commitment that we have, that death till death do us part. You address the psychological well-being of a healthy spouse. And this is where it comes back to all those changes, all those feelings, it's grief, it's the changing of identities, it's changing of roles, that we really need to talk to somebody that's professional and who specializes in dementia care. I really encourage you to get onto a support group. This is a time that we can hear from others and share your experiences with other spouses or other partners of people with dementia, and be able just to talk in a safe, non-judgmental space about what's happening, and then the changes, and hear that, oh gosh, okay, I'm not the only one. This is normal. This is to be expected, kind of, and this is okay. It's okay. I don't have to like it, but it's okay. And again, try not to feel guilty, right? And finding, in particular, if they no longer want to have sex, or you don't no longer want to have sex, find new ways to connect, find new ways for that intimacy. And just real quick, so I know we're getting close to the end of time, but if they're forming relationships after placement, so we do see this as they move into a community, there might be a new relationship that's formed. And there is another movie I encourage you to look at. It's Away from Her. And this discusses how the gentleman has his wife, the wife has the husband in a community, and he forms a relationship with somebody else, and her journey through coping with that and accepting that as well. I also remember hearing or reading an interview with Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and her husband had Alzheimer's disease, and she placed him. And she said very wisely, it makes him happy. In our relationship, she's like, I still love him. He's still my husband. I'm still committed to him. But it makes him happy. And that's the goal at the end of the day. So, and it was, of course, she said it way more eloquently than I did. But it's a nice perspective to have on that. It really, and asking yourself, are they seeking reassurance? Is there just a familiarity there? Is there just a comfort there? And some people just need, when we're scared or we're in an uncomfortable space or an unfamiliar space, but I'm comfortable in this, they might look familiar to them. There's just a safe person there. Again, most of the time, it's not about sex. It's about intimacy and feeling comfortable and having a companion and someone safe that you can go to. The biggest thing that we see with this is families have a harder time with it. Persons with dementia still have a lot of rights, and they have a right to form new relationships. So it really, and then it's asking and talking with that community, what does consent look like? What does capacity look like? And really talking through that with the family. All communities would have procedures and guidelines and policies put in place to help with this. We're not stopping relationships, but if it does come to physical acts, there are procedures and policies put in place, and that's when you talk to the community about it and work through that. So just quickly, other issues, the social limbo being that, that hidden widowhood or a single spouse or a single partner, and what does that look like? And the guilt that can come along if you think you're taking advantage of your spouse by initiating sex. Remember, it just looks like, what is the consent and the capacity? But knowing that you're still in a relationship with your partner, and please don't feel guilty or selfish if you or they masturbate or pursue another relationship outside of the marriage. This is very complex. We only answer to ourselves and to our spouse or our partner, and we want to seek companionship, happiness, and relief from our loneliness. So we do what feels best for you. I encourage you to also talk to a trusted counselor or a religious leader or something as you're working through some of this. or if you are working through some of this. Oh, and here are some other resources as well. A lot of great information out there about sexuality and dementia, but we have just a couple of minutes left. If there are any questions or anything anybody wants to share, it's a lot of information, it's a lot to take on, but I wanted to open that up in the last couple of minutes that we had.
You know, what's a good one is how do you navigate when it's opposite?
You're not muted. You're not muted. Hi, it's Lori and Andrew and Monica from Franklin Park TPC in San Antonio.
Hi.
Are you going to be sending out the information that's on these to us?
Yes, absolutely. I will send out a copy of the slides and the link to the recording as well. And I'll either send it out this afternoon or tomorrow, but y'all will get that for sure.
Oh, Andrew is our memory care director. He was asking how we navigate when we have two residents that have, you know, kind of fallen for each other, even though they both have spouses that come to see them and spend time with them, that sort of thing.
Sure. You know, this is really a conversation with, you know, the spouses, if they have expressed a concern or anything like that, or even just maybe making them aware, maybe they're not aware, that, you know, so-and-so have become really good friends. They like to hold hands. They go to all the activities together. It's really great. And it, you know, have your policies and procedures, you know, in line for anything if it becomes more than that. A lot of this is it intimacy? Are they just good friends and that's just how they're expressing that? But if it does become more of an issue, most of the time it's with the family, and you just talk through the family. A lot of it's education on here's what's happening. We'll do our best to make sure that they are, you know, never alone by any means, but we can't stop them from forming a relationship or holding hands or anything like that. But we can make sure through our staff that they're not left alone or somebody's in their room. And a lot of it is education with the families and saying it's not a reflection of y'all's relationship or anything like that. They just became really good friends. They do activities together. And but it's also making the staff aware if it's an issue or if it's something that the family wants to really mitigate at some point, then it's making the staff aware. Here's what's happening and here's the best ways to intervene with that.
Great, thank you.
Sure, I hope that answered your question. Well, I appreciate you all. Please, again, I'll send that email out. Please feel free if you have any questions or anything like that, please feel free to reach out to me or Holly, who is my colleague, for anything else. And we encourage you, we do have a support group today at 1 o'clock online. If you're interested, please let me know. I'll send you that link. And then, of course, we meet every Friday in person at 11 a.m. here at the James L. West Center. But we hope to see you all on a future program. And I will send out also information about evaluations in my follow-up email. And if you need CE credits for any of those that pertains to, that'll all be in that follow-up email. And please feel free to share our resources. So I appreciate y'all so much. Thank you.